Hello everyone, this is Solaris290 and I'm here today to give you my thoughts on chapter 553 of Kingdom, entitled Ludin. Now, last chapter left off with Heki stuck in his darkest hour yet. Having suffered the loss of half of their food stores, he also faced the wrath of many of Yotanwa's soldiers, who were rightfully angry at him having made such a blunder. And right as Yotanwa was coming up with a rather coldly equated strategy in order to defeat the Quanwong by whatever means necessary, Heki butted in and made it clear about his feelings on the matter, and requested that Yotanwa give him one last chance to redeem himself in her eyes. And while we left off with Yotanwa's decision not yet announced, the start of this chapter makes it pretty clear what exactly that is. And in response to Heki's oath of redemption, Yotanwa smiles and agrees to his terms. And with that, Heki's army will now be one of the main key armies, replacing the Mirror tribe as it turns out. As one can imagine, while Heki is shocked, but no doubt pleased about this, Kitari, on the other hand, not so much. Yotanwa does at least add a caveat that any further failure by Heki himself will not be tolerated. But she does it with a smile. And with that, Heki tears up, while Kitari's eyes go bloodshot, and no doubt wishing to murder Heki in the most brutal way possible at that moment. And with Kitari's cry of rage, we reach the title page, chapter 553, Ludin. So this was great in terms of giving Heki his time to shine, particularly because the author seems to have been putting Heki with a bit of a battering ram recently, what with all his losses, but finally it seems we'll get some chance to see why Heki is truly a capable commander of Qin and why he's been promoted to general over his long period of service. And so, as the new day starts, Heki rides off with his remaining bodyguards. He's informed that all of his ordinary Qin soldiers, at least those left, have been mobilized, but he's not sure about the mountain soldiers just yet. And at that moment, as he's riding forward, he meets Katari and Kitari, who are there waiting for him. And while his soldiers are rightfully a bit concerned about the Mirror siblings, Katari makes it pretty clear that he's not going to tolerate any dissent or any more ramblings from Kitari. And so, Kitari and Kitali once again introduce themselves to Heki, with Kitali biting her tongue for the time being. They are the chieftains of the Mirror tribe, and comprising the army that Yotanwa ordered, Heki's own troops now comprise a total of 5,000 men, and all of them are chanting his name. While his soldiers are initially surprised at the number, Heki's more confused as to why they're chanting his name, and he's informed that Katari made sure to at least teach them their general's name. Katari, bless him, such a kind soul, taking pity on Heki at this time. Or should I say General Heki? Katari then notes that he wants to clear some things up with Heki. As he puts it, Heki, and by extension much of Qin, has some lingering misconceptions about the mountain tribes. And what he clarifies is that more so than you might imagine, we the people of the mountains actually adore you and your kind. With that, I would assume Katari's referring mainly to Chin, given that Yotanwa has fought a number of times on behalf of Chin. It's also important to note that, going by the timeline, it's about 237 BC, I would say. Don't quote me on that, but it's been roughly about 7 years since the Sekyu Rebellion of 245 or so, and within that time, with Yotanwa and the mountain troops having fought as allies of Qin numerous times, it's more than likely they would have at least begun to come to a greater and better understanding of the Qin as their allies. That they have enough adoration of the Qin, of Heki, to leave behind at their homes and travel here to fight your enemies, as Katari says. And that does remind me of the time that Yotanwa had effectively pushed all of her troops to travel within 7 days in order to get to Sai when the Qin army and the Sai civilians were undertaking their last stand against the Zhao forces. He does remind me of that, and so it's a rather heartwarming moment to see just how much the relationship between the people of Qin and the mountain tribes has changed, particularly from their nadir, right when Aisei first negotiated with Yotanwa all the way back at the start of the series. However, Kitali has to put a dampener on that by stating that she herself doesn't adore Heki particularly. And with that, most of Heki's soldiers have arrived, and together it numbers 10,000 troops. Heki is reassured by this, but wants to make one thing clear to Katari, that he needs to have an idea of how to communicate with the mountain troops himself. Ultimately, he can't just rely on Katari to communicate his orders, otherwise it will remove and create a sense of distance between him and the mountain troops that he's trying to command. And so Katari tells him it is Ludin, and with that, Heki roars those words, and the mountain tribes respond in kind. Heki vows that one of the 3 Quanwon commanders shall fall by their hands this day, and all of them get ready for battle. Going back to Yotanwa, her and Bajio are watching this. They note that the Heki and Mera tribe army has set off. The Figo King has also finally dragged himself out of his tent, which is apparently quick by his standards. What does that say about him then, I wonder? Bajio has already assumed his position, and Yotanwa notes that the moment is upon them. But before that, we once again are reacquainted with Empor. Now Empor, as it turns out, is the chieftain of the Enshu tribe, which translates as monkey paw or monkey hand. And he still calls her Mantanwa for whatever reason, but he notes that for Yotanwa to have asked him this now means that she must have an important task for him. And Yotanwa's bodyguards are surprised as well. But to Yotanwa's lofty request, Empor instinctively vetoes it. You have to wonder, Empor clearly has some guts just talking to Yotanwa like that. Anyone else would virtually have their head kicked in. Or worse, but I really am fascinated to see the relationship between Empor and Yotanwa. Now, to diverge for a moment, I'd theorised last chapter that Empor was possibly related to the Kyume tribe, as we'd seen someone with his same collar, which itself is identical to Ten's, back in chapter 515. Now, Empor, as it turns out, is not from the Kyume, although that would be expected since the Kyume had been stated by Bajor to have been wiped out, but I still believe he might be from somewhat of a sister tribe. It's interesting to note that his tribe has an animal theme, i.e. the monkey theme, and Ten's one, the Kyume, have an owl theme, so I still think that if you take into account their shared animal themes, that he and the other one might be from a sister tribe, It's interesting to think about whether or not there are sister tribes, i.e. were the Enshu allies of the Kume tribe once upon a time, and whilst the Kume were wiped out bar Ten and her grandfather, the Enshu tribe clearly made the pragmatic decision to join up under Yotanwa's own army. These are all just speculation at this point, but it's interesting to think about. It'd be fascinating to see where Emperor's role within this arc develops. But now we move on to seeing Shunsuiju. You can tell it's him by his rather distinctive wolf head flags. Reminds me of the Starks, actually. And before that, we see the three brothers of King Rozo. And as Heki's army notes, they've been put up against Buen, or Bunen, the middle brother. He is apparently cruelest of them all. And the Figo king will then be going up against Torque, the youngest. And while Yotanwa's various armies are taking note of their battle strategies and whom they're going up against, Katari notes something off in the distance, which Katari is also alerted to. And Heki too seems to note something, an ominous presence. They realise, looking into the horizon, that the enemy soldiers of the Quanwong keep swarming out, without any clue as to how big their numbers are getting. By the Mera army's count, Bunen's army was already over 15,000 men, and yet there's still more coming. And in front of Baggio, the Gorba army is around 20,000 men, and the Figo army's opponent Torque has 20,000 men as well. So it's clear there's a vast mismatch in terms of numerical advantages at this point. Even Yotanwa's own troops are surprised at this. And they finally come to the conclusion, as Yotanwa says, that their plan might be in jeopardy. And with that we end off with Shunsuiju with Rozo. He notes that with the supplies nearing their end, the first thing that the Qin will do will no doubt be targeting the three commanders. Shunsuiju can see right through their thought processes, which is not a good sign for Yotanwa's army, or Heki for that matter. But Rozo is more eager to finish them right there and then, even before they run out of food, to which Shunsuiju concurs. And so it ends off with things rather not in Yotanwa's favour. But nonetheless, the chapter itself was still great in having the development for Heki. You also got to see a nice interaction between the various members of the mountain tribe and seeing how they've warmed somewhat to Qin. Next chapter is sure to be a grueling one for Yotanwa's army and Heki, assuming that we keep focusing on them. But nonetheless, give me your thoughts and comments below. This is Solaris 290, signing out.